Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. And if you're looking to support on Twitch, and if you're looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today we are doing chapter 54 of a Breaking Step. As with everything, the scholar said, enchantments do fade over time. Everything fades? Tibbs asked before he could stop himself. What about mountains? Haven't they always been there? The sky? Claria? Taurus? Everything, she stated. Some will simply take longer or require violent action from the elements before it is their time. Consider the main element that makes the item in question when thinking of how long it will take. Mountains, for example, are made of stone, which is the element of earth. Earth is slow to react to anything, which makes it resistant to change. So the effort on the part of the elements to bring them down will be much greater than, say, a tree, which is composed of the wood element. Size also come into play, since the more of an element something has, the more effort is required to affect it. A larger tree will resist its end longer than a smaller one. But metal's hard too, and that's always breaking. But under violence, she replied. When left to itself, it will last a long time. Most metal items end up breaking because people are involved. She considered something. But keep in mind that metal isn't a core element, and it is in opposition to air. As such, when the element of air is used against metal, it deteriorates faster. Have you seen how metal items will have a reddish dust or flake on them? Rust. She gave him an indulgent. She gave him an indulgent, yes, they called it that. The implication she included him in that they was strong. You know what? And then there's a smile. What it actually is another element. When a core element interacts with any of the others, weakening it, a new element is created. She said a word he didn't quite understand. It, along with most of what came before, well, as most of those before that had a faint glow to them. Not an outright lie, he'd learned over time, but a lack of certainty in what she said. Potentia, he tried. Close enough, she smiled. It's an old arcanist word, and it is the name of the element of change. It is the one that is always created when a core element weakens another. That had the same faint glow. So it was what she wasn't certain about, despite her seeming confidence. And that potentia element is always there when a core element acts on one of those that isn't core? Yes, the light was brighter, so she knew it wasn't always the case. He tried to think of a way to prod the truth out of her, but he couldn't think of how a bard might sing about something like that. And his curiosity was leading him away from what was important. So, because enchantments have so many essence in them, they also get weaker. Does it only happen when there are both core and the others? What if the enchantment only has core element? Her chuckle sounded strained. Yes, interaction between elements causes enchantments to weaken, but the skill of the sorcerer created as an effect on how sturdy the enchantment will be. He ignored the faint glow. Her uncertainty didn't mean what she said wasn't right, and she sat here answering his question, while anyone else might ask could simply kick him out. How about essences about outside the enchantment? Can they cause it to get weaker too? And you said the potentia element comes when a core and other essences act on each other. Wouldn't that get in the way of the enchantment working? Her smile was bright, and that stuck to the words as she spoke. Exactly. You are quite bright. And I can see you have a strong career within the scholarly academies ahead of you. Potentia is part of that breaking is part of what breaks enchantment down over time. And it's why skill is important when crafting them. The sorcerer has to account for that if they don't want their work to fail prematurely. Tibbs rubbed his temple. He didn't get most of what she said, but why would she bother lying to him? She couldn't know why he was asking. Was she trying to make him feel smarter so he would, what, join a university? He was too young, and she had to be smart enough to know that her lies would unravel when he brought up her stories as part of what made him want to join. And it's always like that, he asked, hoping to sound like he didn't understand and hope, oh boy. And that would force her, and that forcing her to clarify would reveal something that was true, or why she was lying. Potentia is created within the enchantment that, along with the degradation caused by the core elements, weakens it until it fails. Not everyone agrees it's what happened, she says dismissively. Wait, what do you mean not everyone agrees? There had been no light on the words. I thought university were about finding out how things worked, that the books told us how that was. Universities are where we investigate how the world works, and then the scholars write their books to document how their research demonstrate that their beliefs are the correct ones. Then you keep the books of those who are right. He thought that made sense, but her offended expression said he was wrong. How would I know who is right? How would anyone? Whoever the magic says is right? Magic can't tell you what is right and what is wrong, she stated. Light can, he replied, immediately realizing he was wrong. No, light can be used to tell you if someone believes they are telling the truth or not. But that isn't the same as them being wrong. Magic is a tool, and like all tools, it can be used for many purposes, even some that oppose each other. Then why would anyone read books if they can't know what's if they can't know what if what's in it is true? He thought of Karina and how she relied on books for everything she knew. How she so wanted him to read because she thought it would help him. Had she been wrong? If you mean the common folk, she gave a dismissive shrug, I expect those who can read do so to make themselves feel superior to those who can't. If you mean scholars, then, in reading someone else's work, I can glimpse something that will help propel my research further. Tibbs fought against his disappointment. None of that. None of them helped. None of them helped then. What you're saying is that what you told me about how enchantments weaken over time might not be how it happens. She opened and closed her mouth on the glow. Her stance shifted as she studied him. Was that suspicion? Suspicion in her gaze? In her eyes? Had he given himself away? When she spoke, it was in the careful tone that people who wanted what they said to sound true as they lied did. Only there was no light on her words. We know some things. She paused to let out a breath. Good scholars don't say things like, we know for certain. But some things have been demonstrated with one experiment after another to always happen. So those things we can be confident are true. But not certain? Nervousness. That's what he was seeing as she shook her head, as if she realized he'd caught her in the lie. One such thing is that elements interact. They work together to form effect. The right combination of them can be used to make just about anything happen. They also interact without sorcerers being involved. That rust on metal, for example. Potentia and how the core elements weakened. He stopped as she stiffened. Maybe, she finally said uncertainly. She let out a chuckle, then relaxed. It's what I believe happens, and many of my experiments have shown that when the core element interacts with another one, a change happens. That means another element must come of it. Other experiments support my belief. She hesitated. But they don't support that Potentia is the cause. The element is real, she assured him, and there was no light on the words but exceedingly rare. Adventurers who have spoken about the element with scholars all spoke of it in different ways, as if it was different for each of them. But the one thing they said that they the one thing they seem to agree on is that what they do stands at the cusp of change. It is why she closed her mouth on the light, took a breath, and continued without it. I believe it is what is present when elements interact. Tibbs was careful. He had the sense the effort of honesty had been hard for her, and he didn't want to undermine that. But it could be something else. Her nod seemed to carry acceptance. It could. Academia isn't about proving that I am right. It is about demonstrating why my beliefs are better supported than others. She chuckled sadly. I tend to forget that sometimes. I'm sorry. I just asked about a story. This time her chuckle was filled with amusement. That is the danger of speaking with a scholar. We so love to explain what we're about. She let out a slow breath. But to return to your story, without all the minutiae. Sorry, to return to your story without all the minutiae. Yes, enchantment grow old and weaken. In such a state, they are more susceptible to malicious alteration, or simply not doing what they were supposed to. It's why anyone who relies on magic for their security has the enchantments rejuvenate, rejuvenated regularly, and why old places, lost places, will have not only weaker enchantments but unpredictable ones. Even if they were made by an alpha sorcerer, time will take its toll on them. So that's how the adventurer in the story got into the old building. She altered the enchantment. She laughed lightly. It's a bard story. In she got in because the story needed her to get in. But yes, out there, where adventurers might encounter a tower from back when sorcerers worked alone, or some forgotten warlord's vault, they could take advantage of an enchantment weakened. An enchantment's weakened state and pry and tease it apart until they could get in. Wouldn't they have to have the same element? In stories, if they don't have the right element, they can't really do much to defend themselves. Again, stories don't care about what is real, and we are straying from what I know confidently. She thought about it. The right element might simplify it. Some elements lend themselves more to that kind of work than others. But when it comes to magic, what I have read all seems to agree that skill with the element and how much of it they have access to is the determining factor in in succeeding in whatever task was set before them. Tibbs wanted to ask which element she thought would be best to tease the enchantment apart, but even if she knew the answer, it would be too telling of what he was after. Does this answer all your questions? No, he said, unable to keep from sounding indignant. He rubbed his temple again. But I think it's all I can stand right now. Cherish it. It's a good pain. Pain's never good, he countered. It's the pain of your mind stretching, she said with a smile. That is a good thing. He stared at her. Hadn't someone told him that before? He stood. I should go. She stood with him. Do you need assistance finding your parents? I'm surprised they haven't come looking yet. Right. She'd assume he'd gotten separated from his family. They'd probably still reading. I'll find them. Thank you. He made a circuit of the shelves, keeping his sense on her until she walked to the third balcony and paused before a shelf. Then he headed outside and let the rain cool his headache. He wished Purity helped with this type of pain, but he figured it was just like that element to want him to work through it to improve. Tibbs hung from the top of the window frame, the rain pelting against him hard enough it could be fists. It was a good thing water didn't hurt him anymore, or all of them might have resulted in his death. Yeah. This may require addressing, but I'm going to wait until someone brings it up. He studied the strand of the weave before him. as he'd done the 3 previous nights. This time, he thought he'd worked out enough of those he could identify to attempt something. Distance shouldn't matter so long as he sensed the weave, so he could do this from the roof, but the sense that the closer he was, the better scent. Oh boy. But the feeling. But the feeling that the closer he was, the better sense of it he would have wouldn't leave him. From this close, he knew it wasn't true. He wished he could simply throw corruption and watch the weave dissolve. It would be easy since he couldn't sense anything that might protect against it, but that would result in the chaos of a destroyed enchantment and attract attention. What he needed was to part the strand around the window without breaking them. He'd spent the previous night studying how the strand flowed, how they connected to those around them, and where they had become detached. Tonight, it was his first attempt at widening the space between two of them. He studied the arcanas that made the filigree that connected the strands. Finding one with only those he already knew was easier than he expected. Jeer, Ankh, Boar, and Ka seemed to be unexpectedly common. Maybe because they represented air, fire, earth, and water, which seemed to be considered the more important ones of the core elements. Fey, Mor, Dew, and Lil then seemed to be used after that. Ike was the only other he knew, since that was metal, and there were few of them. Researching the others was somewhere on his list of things to do. He teased the two he selected further from where they detached and studied how the still connected arcanus reacted. They stretched and stretched again before they deformed and he stopped. He figured that if they changed too much, they would break. It might not be a problem, considering the strands were already separated where he held them, but he also had no idea if there was a point where too many breaks would cause a reaction. To alleviate the strain, he added more of the arcanus within the filigree, stacking them atop each other until they covered the gap. Then he waited. When nothing happened, he pulled again until those arcanus started deforming and added more. With the next pull, he had the added complication of not tangling the strand with others. By the fifth edition of Arcanus, his problem became fighting impatience. It was clear no one was noticing what he did, so he could hurry this along. But even Bard's story made clear what happened when a rogue thought he could rush things along. They took for granted everything would be as before, and they ended up captured. In the stories, it led to more adventures, a daring escape for him. It led to more adventure, a daring escape. For him, it would lead to a stay in the cells. Maybe. Archer made it sound like the people in the brokerage might not bother getting the city guards involved. Ever so slowly, those two strands were far enough Tibs could fit through. So his new problem was, how did he keep them that way? It had been something he'd thought over and was studying as... Wait, what? He thought over was studying them? It was something he'd thought over while studying the weave. They couldn't risk attaching them to other strands without understanding how they might react. He needed to place the strands so he needed to place the strand the strands he needed to place the strand that would hold it himself. Huh? Oh wow. Okay, he needed to place the strand against something that would hold it for him. Water, air, and fire wouldn't work. None of them did solid easily. Even adding Fey to them until they were hard would require him to remain focused. What he what he'd do was more of an etching than a weave. It was nothing like a weave, since he didn't know how to make those yet. That meant earth or metal. There was hardly any metal within the wall, but plenty of earth as part of the stonework that made the outside. He moved the strand. You know what? Part of the stonework. He moved the strand. He moved the strand of his earth essence within that of the brick, moving it under and over that of the stone. I'm not going to specify. That of the stone, moving it over and under and over, around and back, weaving it until what he had felt more solid and didn't immediately fray when he stopped focusing on it. He formed a hook out of the essence and rested one of the strands from the enchantment on it. He did the same on the other side of the window. He'd done it. He'd made a gap he could pass through. Well, between those two strands, there were several of them left within the window's enchantment. He pulled himself to the roof, still without guards, and lay on his back. His arms didn't hurt, earth ensured. Holding on was effortless, but his head pounded. Come on. Pounded from focusing so hard and long, as well as what this taught him. Weave could be altered if they were able to sense the strands and knew the arcanas that made out the filigree. Someone could move an enchantment out of their way. Maybe. For this to work as he needed it, the two strands and hooks. This to work as he needed, the two strands and hooks had to remain there not only while he moved the others, but while he was in the building getting archer's quains from some safe he knew nothing about. His headache would not go away so long as he remained in this city. He was certain of that. But for tonight, the work was done. He checked the state of the hooks and strands tomorrow and moved from there until he was able to go in. And that concludes chapter 54 of Breaking Step. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the story, as well as the others in the series, they are up for free on Royal Road. If you want to read ahead of that and support me on my Patreon, it's about 20 chapters ahead. And if you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the note. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.